This week's episode was brought to you by Stephen T. and Harley Wilson. If you enjoy listening to The Whole Rabbit and would like to help us keep making weird esoteric content every week, please consider becoming a subscriber at www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 gets you access to not only our entire library of extended episodes, but our Discord server as well, the best place to communicate with other fans of the show and the creators too. You'll also get a 5x5 vinyl bonus sticker of our cover art sent directly to you at no additional cost. On this week's episode, we explore the connection between Fight Club, the life of the Buddha, the face-slapping wisdom of Rinzai Zen, and the biblical spirit of Nimrod. Whether you're a fan of the novel by Chuck Palahniuk or the film by David Fincher, we hope you'll discover something entirely new to add to your library of thought about Fight Club and give you a good excuse to watch it or read it again. In the extended show, we talk about Rinzai Zen initiatory practices, the Qabbalistic tarot symbolism, and Hollywood egregores. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Yeah, they cannot get out. It's called a crab bucket online because everybody you're talking to is ruining your life in some way, and they don't want you to positively improve.
Yeah, they want you to stay down there with them so that they feel some kind of acceptance or that it's okay to be this way and not try to climb out.
I think that's a great statement on like the whole meme culture and how it is kind of like some little spells that you're casting on people's psyche.
I heart death.
You need a shirt that says that.
I almost had one. Didn't get it for Christmas.
Bad Santa.
I am Jack's broken heart.
I'm gonna crush Santa's balls in my high heels.
Hello everybody and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where the first rule is you do not talk about the Discord server. The second rule is you do not talk about the Discord server. The third rule is only one speaker at a time. Fourth rule, if someone yells stop, goes limp, or begins crying, the recording is over, temporarily. Fifth, no coughs, no echoes. The sixth rule is edits will go as long as they have to because this week we're discussing Fight Club and what makes it a modern Zen Buddhist koan. I'm Jack's raging podcast host, Luke Madrid. I look around this room and I see a lot of courage. That gives me strength. Please give a warm welcome to co-host Mari Sama-chan.
Konnichiwa.
The Honorable Daimyo Dingus.
I'm just Jack. I'm Jack. You've heard so much about me.
The spiky floor at the bottom of a Mortal Kombat stage, Malachor 5.
If you hold down while you do the uppercut near the skull on the wall, you unlock a secret fatality.
And Hakase Haka Astra.
Hello.
So something I find interesting in this movie, just right off the bat, everything in it is intricately symbolic, and the way the symbols lace and weave back around each other paints a greater picture of what this movie is trying to say. And one of those that doesn't seem like much at first, maybe just like a grimy extra little detail for the movie, is the inclusion of the incest survivors group on the paper, right as he's beginning to talk about his addiction to going to groups. And I think that alone tells us a little bit about his relationship with Bob later on in the movie. Narrator and Bob's relationship has features of what's called emotional incest in child psychology, which is where the parent burdens the child with the responsibilities, both emotional and physical, of an adult. Kind of makes them like a personal therapist or just cries to him all the time, you know? And really the first moment that the narrator describes feeling, quote, awakened or approaching awake is when he cries with Bob in his big buxom tits. And then Bob later does the same thing when he goes to Fight Club and he's become enraptured with the personality of Tyler Durden, who becomes the effeminate Bob's father figure, and it later kills him. But like there is a definite emotional incestuous relationship between Bob and narrator, to the point that it's narrator's preferential treatment that kills him, really. It's how he got into Fight Club. He wouldn't have made it otherwise.
You always hurt the ones you love.
It's just because you're close to them and people contain a high amount of the radioactive carbon-14 isotope.
But it also works both ways.
It does.
Now, Fight Club began as a novel by Chuck Palahniuk, and then later became the classic film adaptation by David Fincher, starring Edward Norton, Brad Pitt, and Helena Bonham Carter. Of course, we'd be stupid to not mention Meatloaf, who played Bob. Bob becomes a stand-in for the narrator's parents. We know that Bob is estranged from his kids, Like the narrator is estranged from his father. We know that the narrator's father is estranged from a whole bunch of his families because he goes and he sets up a new one every few years. Bob has breasts like a mother figure. He has open arms. He shows receptiveness to emotion, and this makes him a bit like the divine feminine. Narrator even finds temporary release, crying in Bob's breasts, returning to the safety of childhood. We see him afterwards curled up like a baby, almost in the fetal position, as if he just got done sucking a nipple or sucking a thumb.
When you refer to him as divine feminine, I do think that's interesting because Bob really ends up being a bit of like a hermaphrodite.
Now, David Fincher admits to there being spiritual elements in the film, only going as far to say that he knows there's a spiritual motif of the spiritual seeker having to kill their parents, their master, and eventually themselves. We find in the film that narrator only gives up on Fight Club once Bob is killed. Likewise, we see that Bob probably shouldn't have been in Fight Club. He's given special preferential treatment in that he's allowed to keep his shirt on during fights. We know that for production it was because of the fat suit, but later we see on the doorstep he's given more preferential treatment vis-a-vis encouragement to come back and wait on the doorstep, where if he had just been treated like everyone else, he never would have made it into Project Mayhem, and thusly never would have been killed, meaning narrator is still clinging to his parents, and it's only after he kills his parent that he gives up on Fight Club entirely.
Yeah, and in regards to like the divine feminine inside of like this big, former world heavyweight lifting champ or some shit like that, right? It's like the role of Bob was like the mother figure and the dad in that support group that he found peace in so he can sleep. Bob's like the parent and narrator's like the child, but when Project Mayhem kicks in, the roles switch, and it's what ends up killing Bob.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think it's just divine maternal feminine. I think it's also divine paternal masculine. That's represented in Bob. And obviously the narrator has an issue with both of his parents. You see the conversation in the bathroom between him and Tyler, where they both talk about they've been raised by women. Like, I think women aren't the right answer to us. So they also have a negative association towards women, and at the same time expressing their estrangement from their father figures. And Tyler mentions it at 6 years old. And we also know that every 6 years, the father left to start a new family.
Bob is safe, though, because he doesn't have his testicles. He's a safe father figure that's not going to leave narrator. He's not going to break up with him the way his father broke up with him.
To start a new family, right. to have more children, because he can't.
Well, really, this is something I find fascinating about Fight Club 2, is that this is where some of that layered storytelling comes into play. Because in this moment, it absolutely is both about a spiritual concept and underdeveloped men seeking out father figures where they might not have them.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where we need to say that of all the different interpretations you'll find on the internet about Fight Club, we're not really here to disprove them. We're more here to build on them and show our own spin and what it has to do with Eastern religion. To get us started, we notice that most of the names in Fight Club have some sort of a hidden meaning. To begin with Bob, the name Robert means fame and bright lights. If you read the novel, we find that Bob was addicted to the fame and the bright lights. He thought it was better than real life. We know that his hormones got messed up because he was
taking all sorts of steroids and shit. I also found that detail interesting just now because one of the stereotypes about bodybuilders in particular is that they're effeminate. You know, that they spend the entire day obsessing over their figure and every calorie, and they go to competitions to show off their bodies in swimsuits.
Is that what a real man looks like?
If you want it to be, baby.
Narrator finds himself asking that of Tyler, and Tyler, vice versa. Is that what a real man looks like? All those people having to stuff themselves in gyms to be what consumer culture wants them to be.
Yeah, he mentions that when they're on the bus and there's a Gucci advertisement with like a muscly dude with his shirt off and flexing, like doing this pose.
By attempting to be this perfect image, this perfect body, he ends up actually losing his huevos. He loses his productive capacity and his ability to be a father. By chasing this consumer dream, he's lost the very thing he's been chasing this whole time, the thing he's been attached to.
Well, yeah, and Bob in and of himself is like this effeminate figure that's like sensitive and emotional. And I'm not saying that going to support group makes you effeminate or sensitive or emotional, but he meets him there and let's cry. Okay, now you cry. If anybody said that to me, I would, but out of fear.
Bringing up the meaning of Robert's name also brings up the meaning of one of his aliases, which is Rupert, which is one derivative from Robert, but also means son of Robert. But you'll see that he doesn't use that alias in the same group as Bob. He uses it like secretly in another group. To Bob, he's Cornelius.
I looked up the meaning of Cornelius, which it's an old Latin name. It's biblical. There's a Bible story in the New Testament where a Roman centurion or a commander of troops actually has an angel come to him and tells him to visit St. Peter. Then the man converts to Christianity, and he's the first Gentile conversion into Christianity that is cited in the Bible. And then the name literally means horn in Latin, or it's derived from the word horn. Bob would call out, "Hey, Cornelius," on the street, but that call was a calling to tread the path of enlightenment. That's why you heard that name a lot more frequently.
Which brings us to Buddhism. At this point, you might be thinking, there's no way Fight Club has anything to do with Buddhism. After all, Buddhism is a bunch of peaceful vegetarians in orange robes who sit around all day meditating and eating rice, being nice to everybody, right? The exact sentiment expressed by the narrator to Tyler about halfway through the novel. In the novel, narrator is sent home by his boss for having bloodstains on his pants. He pressures Tyler to make soap so he can comply by washing them. During their soap-making activities, Tyler suggests overloading his boss's plumbing with a hand pump. He elaborates. Depending on the pressure, the effect could range from expensive mischief all the way up to transforming his shower head into a mortar shell. Narrator first defends his boss, saying that he likes him, and then continues, "Besides, I'm enlightened now, you know? Only Buddhist-style behavior. Spider chrysanthemums, the Diamond Sutra and the Blue Cliff Record. Hari Rama, you know? Krishna Krishna, you know? Enlightened." To which Tyler responds,
"Sticking feathers up your butt does not make you a chicken."
Lovely. He's just repeating the packaged and consumer version of the Eastern religion.
Honestly, it's what most people involved in any kind of religion or spirituality are doing. That's really like the point of, say, the parable of the broad and the narrow road, which you can look up and immediately get like a one-paragraph summary of. So we're not going to say that here.
Interestingly, if you look at the list that he gives in this short exchange with Tyler, you'll find that a big theme in the Diamond Sutras and the Blue Cliff Record is the avoidance of sticking feathers up your butt and calling yourself a chicken.
Like, really, it's one of the classic human spiritual blunders is assuming identities and saying, this is what I am. Now everything is fine. But the persistence of time means that can't be true.
And this is a persistent problem in Buddhism. Our last episode was called If You See the Buddha on the Path, Bonk Him. And this is a direct reference to Rinzai Zen, where Rinzai taught his students, if you see the Buddha on the path, you should kill him. Meaning, if you don't stick feathers up your butt, don't identify with the teachings. The whole idea is to remove attachment, and by being attached, you're not getting the teachings. You're in fact getting it diametrically wrong. Looking at the list that the narrator gives, he claims that he's enlightened, the end goal of the Buddha and his subsequent teachings. Following this, he claims to be following, quote, Buddha-style behavior. The narrator himself claims to be on the Buddhist path. Nextly, spider chrysanthemums are used widely for funerals in both Eastern and Western traditions, representing purity, truth, grief, and of course, death.
Some good foreshadowing right there.
It can also be used in wedding ceremonies.
Death, flower, wedding, Arla.
And this comes right before he gets his hand burned and goes through the chemical wedding with Tyler.
What I found interesting about the chemical burn is that it's totally Tyler kisses narrator's hand first. So the chemical burn is in the shape of Tyler's lips on the hand of every one of these macho men in his fucking cult. They're all gay. I mean, kind of. Look, it's like it goes back to the incest survivors group. They're all fucking in their mind or in their hearts, not really in their minds. Then they'd be literally gay. But if you fuck in your hearts, you know, the balls don't touch. It's okay, bro.
Yeah. So on the notion of, you know, the chemical wedding, if you're not familiar with it, it's like integrating your holy guardian angel. And it's kind of interesting that it symbolizes as a wet kiss, because that's what you do, right? You may kiss the bride, you know, and that seals the deal after the vows are said.
And notice right hand too.
Oh, interesting.
Next on the list is the Blue Cliff Record. Well, what's that? It's a collection of koans from early Zen, or as it's known in Chinese, Chan Buddhism. and it was compiled in 1125 AD in Song, China. The Blue Cliff Record is considered central to Zen teaching. In Case 32, the founder of Rinzai Zen, Rinzai enlightens one of his high priests using physical violence. I will read it verbatim. Blue Cliff Record, Case 32. A senior monk, Joe, asked Rinzai, "What is the essence of Buddhism?" Rinzai came down from his seat, grabbed him by the lapels, slapped him, and thrust him away. Joe stood there as if rooted to the spot. A monk standing nearby said, "Senior monk Joe, why don't you make a deep bow?" As he made a deep bow, Joe suddenly attained a great enlightenment.
Do you think he farted when he did? Yeah. He could have shit himself. It was olden times. He probably had worms.
If Chuck was writing it, he would have. Besides slapping and beating his students, which Hecka will go into greater detail later, Rinzai's teaching methods involved the contemplation of koans, which this event eventually became. Contrary to popular understanding, koans are not so much paradoxically unsolvable riddles, but, as one source puts it, enigmatic and often shocking spiritual expressions based on dialogical encounters between masters and disciples. This makes Fight Club, in the traditional sense, a Zen koan, if not a set of Zen koans.
I'm actually really glad this gets brought up in the episode for no other reason than I remember this being taught to me when I was in middle school about Buddhism. And then I never heard the word again. And I've been racking my brain ever since trying to remember what the fuck those riddles were called so I could look some up.
Some of the more popular ones that a lot of people know about is what is the sound of one hand clapping?
Okay.
That's a koan. Same with the whole, if a tree falls in a forest and there's no one there, it doesn't make a sound.
In terms of Buddhism's three major schools, Zen is considered a school within the Mahayana branch of Buddhism. Its collection of sacred texts, the Prajnaparamita, contains 18 smaller texts, the Diamond Sutra being one of the most popular. Prajnaparamita combines the Sanskrit word prajna, wisdom or knowledge, with paramita, perfection. Prajnaparamita is conceptually associated with ideas such as emptiness, sunyata, the lack of essence, or sambhava, the illusory nature of things, maya, and non-arisingness, being unborn, or anupada, and the mind stream of Vishnu. Prajnaparamita is also manifest as a goddess of the same name who is seen as a personification of wisdom itself, given the title of the Great Mother. Like the Zen koans, the Diamond Sutra is also a record of conversations between teacher and student. In this case, the Buddha himself and his disciple, Subhuti.
To reiterate, we're talking about the discussion that is being had and the concepts mentioned right before he burns narrator's hand, which is the chemical marriage, the encounter with the holy guardian angel, or in the Buddhist sense, his yidam.
Specifically in the novel.
Specifically in the novel. So Tyler's reply, "Sticking feathers up your butt does not make you a chicken," is characteristic of the teachings of the Diamond Sutra, as it is meant to shock the narrator into shedding their identity with such concepts in order that they may realize their teachings authentically, instead of merely through grotesque, unreflective adherence to their trappings as anything absolute or objective. This recursive meta view of wisdom pushing up against non-being and non-essence is central to the Diamond Sutra. The text was originally discovered in 1900 by a monk in Dunhuang, China, an old outpost of the Silk Road on the edge of the Gobi Desert. The Diamond Sutra, a Sanskrit text translated into Chinese, was one of the 40,000 scrolls and documents hidden in, quote, the Cave of 1,000 Buddhas, a secret library sealed up around the year 1000 when the area was threatened by a neighboring kingdom. In 1907, British-Hungarian archaeologist Mark Orlstein was on an expedition mapping the ancient Silk Road when he heard about the secret library. He bribed the abbot of the monastic group in charge of the cave and smuggled away thousands of documents, including the Diamond Sutra. This is why a lot of conspiracy theories are lost on me. You can't even get your ancestor to hide your fucking sacred texts in a tomb for 100 years. It's bullshit.
Actually, the Diamond Sutra is considered to be the oldest book in print, according to some sources. The same way the Gutenberg Bible was like a mass-printed book. It's said that the Diamond Sutra is like maybe the first one.
Can't wait to tell that to the Christians in my life who find it necessary to argue with me.
So before a bunch of people came to like destroy that whole culture, it was like a book they were trying to get out there. Within the Diamond Sutras, it says, therefore, anyone who seeks total enlightenment should discard not only all conceptions of their own selfhood, of other selves, or of a universal selves, but they should also discard all notions of the non-existence of such concepts, says the Buddha.
Even beyond the personification of like in your mind that like, oh, I don't need anything, like beyond that, you don't even need that mentality, right?
Right.
That makes a lot of sense to me, at least in my kind of headcanon for what's happening in Fight Club, because Tyler, being like a holy guardian angel or a yidam, is an embodiment of these concepts in a sense. Now, when we were watching the movie, I just felt an urge to point out Tyler Durden is not a human being. This, in essence, backs it up. The mind state that they're describing here is not a human mind state.
If we're talking about Buddhism, straight up, he's a tulpa. You know, within the Buddhist realm of words, he's a tulpa. He's a thought form created. You know, we're making the argument that he's like the holy guardian angel and all these other things, but the way he's definitely presented in the movie, he's a tulpa. He's not real.
But you could also call him like a servitor. There are hundreds of magical words for it.
Mm-hmm. Buddhism regards these things, tulpas, teachers, as a means to an end. To reference the Diamond Sutra, when the Buddha explains these things using such concepts and ideas, people should remember the unreality of such concepts and ideas. They should recall that in teaching spiritual truths, the Buddha always uses these concepts and ideas the way a raft is used to cross a river. Once the river has been crossed over, the raft is of no more use and should be discarded. These arbitrary concepts and ideas about spiritual things need to be explained to us as we seek to attain enlightenment. However, ultimately, these arbitrary conceptions can be discarded. Think, Subhuti, isn't it even more obvious that we should also give up our conceptions of non-existent things?
I'm going to think about that for a second.
Yeah, to me, it's a little talking a little bit about crossing the abyss, getting rid of the physical vessel. You know, you're going to have this alchemical marriage with Tyler Durden. You know, at the end of the movie, he's straight up telling him, like, you're a voice in my head. He's like, yeah, you're a voice in my head. Like, I got to take over you.
Well, the Buddha's suggesting to not merge with Tyler, but to use Tyler to reach enlightenment and then discard him.
He realizes that he's not lost in that abyss, and he's like, wait, the gun's not in your hand, it's in mine. So he starts to get a grip, and then he finishes the job, for sure. Because it was almost the other way around, is what I'm saying, is that Tyler almost blew the narrator's brains out.
I think that this is also kind of an extension of a mechanism that the early Buddhists attempt to use to prevent their followers from becoming dogmatic. And you can actually see this at play in Project Mayhem. All right, so if you want to translate this to how it would affect one's perception of language and what you would tell them and teach them in an oral tradition, they want you to discard of the word for something, your conception of the information, right? Your rigid idea of how to apply it. And they want you to be able to receive the knowledge. Like, I don't know how to put it into words exactly, but there's a lot of ways that a teaching could go awry just between it being spoken and heard and understood. And you can see this at play in Project Mayhem when Bob dies. And the narrator comes out and says, no, this guy has a name. His name was Robert Paulson. And then his little buddy Cross goes, I think I understand. When a member of Project Mayhem dies, they have a name. His name is Robert Paulson.
We know from the movie wherever he goes, he hears that same devotional mantra to Robert Paulson, right? To wrap up this list, before narrator gets his hand burnt, he mentions Hari Rama. Well, who's that? It's a reference to a bhakti marga, or a devotional path in Hinduism, initiated by
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu,
who got it into his mind that he could spread a mantra found in the Kali Sanatarana Upanishad to every nation and city on earth. In this Upanishad, a poet, singer, musician, mystic hero type named Nimrod is studying under Hindu creation deity Brahma, who instructs on a secret method of banishing Kali's negative aspects.
Hearken all that which the Vedas keep secret and hidden, through which one may cross the samsara of Kali. He shakes off Kali through the mere uttering of the name of the Lord of Vishnu, who's the primeval god.
Neruda asks to be told of this secret name of Vishnu, and Brahma replies,
Hari Hari Rama Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. These 16 names are destructive of the evil effects of Kali. No better means than this is to be seen in all the Vedas. Why would you want to do that? I want her to step on my chest, like she did that other guy.
So much like the fictional Tyler Durden, the real
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu
was successful at spreading his simple evangel of escaping samsara worldwide. So what is samsara? Samsara is a Sanskrit and Pali word meaning world. It is also the concept of rebirth, the cycle of all life, matter, and existence, a fundamental belief of most Indian religions. Popularly, it is the cycle of death and rebirth. Samsara is sometimes described as re-death, or a cycle of aimless drifting, wandering, or mundane existence.
Well, re-death is really like a total glass half empty way of looking at things.
It's portrayed that way in the Vedas quite often, as not so much the cycle of rebirth, but the cycle of re-death. Because death sucks. You don't want to keep dying over and over.
But you can't have sex in heaven.
We're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no great war, no great depression. Our great war is a spiritual war. Our great depression is our lives.
According to Buddhism, desire and ignorance lie at the root of all suffering. By desire, Buddhists refer to craving, pleasure, material goods, and immortality, all of which are wants that can never be satisfied. As a result, desiring them can only bring suffering.
After disaster can we be resurrected. It's only after you've lost everything that you're free to do anything. Nothing is static. Everything's evolving. Everything is falling apart. I really like that second sentence there. It's only after that you've lost everything that you're free to do anything. That might sound like you could do anything, but I think it should be better phrased as like do anything at all. You have to kind of hit bottom so that you can see what you can work with anyway. It doesn't mean that the sky's the limit in terms of possibility. I think there's some more wisdom there that like to even walk, you have to learn
to crawl.
Some basic shit. Yeah, you have to learn some basic shit.
How can you know anything about yourself if you've never been in a fight?
Thus, it would seem that Tyler Durden has realized that clinging to anything as an absolute, even a concept of self, leads to suffering and desire, which cannot be quenched, save for one's releasing of identity, all attachment to them, and following a path laid out by Tyler's philosophy. This more or less constitutes the exact shadow of the Four Noble Truths, first established by the Buddha. They are as follows. 1. Dukkha. That suffering is an innate characteristic of the realm of samsara, or the world. Samudaya. Of this dukkha or suffering arises craving, or tanha, which is a desire or an attachment. Nirodha, which is the cessation or ending of this suffering, and can be attained by the renouncement or letting go of tanha, or your craving or thirst. The fourth noble truth, then, is marga, the noble eightfold path. This is the path leading to renouncement of tanha and the cessation of dukkha or suffering. This part is replaced by Tyler's own marga, the Tyler Marga. Tyler, applying his own spin to the Eightfold Path, is how different schools of Buddhism came to exist in the first place, which leads us finally to the question, who is Tyler Durden? So from one perspective, if Fight Club is a koan about the life of the Buddha, I think it's possible that Tyler Durden represents the Atman, the higher self, the holy guardian angel, or the Ishtadeva. And the goal of most Hindu religion is to gain some sort of a marriage or union with that Atman, and to become as that Atman, to basically eliminate the lower self and become that higher inner core self, the highest potential of one's being, which is heavenly. And this is the Atman.
I want to be a Atman.
Interesting saying that Tyler, Brad Pitt's character, is the Buddha, because then we're saying, you have to kill him if it's on your path to enlightenment. And that's exactly what narrator does by shooting himself.
I saw Tyler as more of a shadow figure, or the shadow of narrator.
I think there's a lot of that discussion to be had too, is that he is like the toxic masculinity, personified in like a tulpa form. But I think there's more to it, because it's just like a very extreme integration of like two completely polarizing, personas.
Tyler Durden is not a human being. I don't want to say he's a god or a demigod, but he's an idea. He's an ideal. He behaves in a way that a human being wouldn't be able to. And even though ideas can take over other people's minds in the way they do, in cults. Cults are when an idea seizes a group of people to the extent that they would be willing to give their lives for it.
But I mean, he wasn't trying to kill anybody. He was like, all the buildings are empty, He starts taking more extreme steps. And, when you're in the chemical marriage, this thing loves you, because he even telling him, when have I ever let you down? When have I ever like pretty much not loved you and did what's right for us? And he's right. And, narrator knows this. What happens when you break up a relationship like that? Because in the movie, his getting rid of it means he kind of wins and he integrates it instead of Brad Pitt absorbing the body or taking over the body, right? Like,
yeah, he faces his shadow and integrates it and then becomes enlightened.
So that he can talk to Marla, at the right perspective. He tells her, like, as soon as he knows that he is Tyler, he goes and he finds it, right? She doesn't want anything to do with them.
In a movie that revolves around fighting, and you could say martial arts or the application of martial arts in the pursuit of enlightenment, at the end of the movie, when he attains that, quote, enlightenment or the allegory for it, the student defeats the master. He exorcises Tyler from his body by outwitting him and being braver than him.
So if Tyler is a tulpa or is his shadow, I think it's possible he was created at 6 years old when narrator's father left the picture, and the trauma of his father breaking up with him necessitated the creation of Tyler to act as his imaginary friend, his ideal self, or this immortal ideal father figure, which from the perspective of esoteric Buddhism, that's what the Atman might be. It could be considered the final shadow in that, like, traditional Hinduism is seeking out this ideal eternal self, which we might relate to Tyler. And in Buddhism, it's sort of heretical to Hinduism because you're letting go of this eternal self. And as Dinga said, you're basically killing it or defeating it.
I think Tyler is an externalized persona that stemmed from narrator's trauma. And it was a seed that was planted when he was 6 years old. And the actual form, the physical form that the narrator sees of Tyler comes to fruition like a seed turning into a larger plant and blossoming. Marla was the catalyst.
I fully agree with that interpretation too.
So Tyler's first name, it means builder. And surprisingly, it means Tyler, like somebody who lays tile or builds with tile. Durden is an Old English word for dior, meaning deer, and Danu, which meant valley, collectively meaning the valley of the deer.
In the world I see, you are stalking elk through the damp canyon forest around the ruins of Rockefeller Center. You'll wear leather clothes that will last you the rest of your life. You'll climb the wrist-thick kudzu vines that wrap the Sears Towers. And when you look down, you'll see tiny figures pounding corn, laying stripes of venison on the empty carpool lane of some abandoned superhighway.
So here we have invoked this idea of a hunter who's climbing a tower. So both the symbolism of a builder and a master hunter come together in the biblical idea of Nimrod. The Bible states that he was a mighty hunter before the Lord and began to be mighty in the earth. Later, extra-biblical tradition identified Nimrod as the ruler who commissioned the construction of the Tower of Babel, which led to his reputation as a king who was rebellious against God. Nimrod has not been attested in any historic, non-biblical registers, records of king lists, including those of Mesopotamia itself. So like Tyler, he's a bit of a mythological, made-up, not really real person, but he represents this idea of a hunter king who was rebelling against God and, of course, built the Tower of Babel. So you take all those symbols together, Tyler Durden could be the ancient spirit of Nimrod.
Got the hunting horn, too.
He's got
Cornelius, yeah.
Josephus wrote of Nimrod, "Now it was Nimrod who excited them to such an affront and contempt of God. He was the grandson of Ham, the son of Noah, a bold man, and of great strength of hand. This is your hand. This is your burning hand." He persuaded them not to ascribe it to God, as if it were through his means they were happy, but to believe that it was their own courage which procured that happiness. He also gradually changed the government into tyranny, seeing no other way of turning men from the fear of God, but to bring them into a constant dependence on his power. He also said he would be revenged on God if he should have a mind to drown the world again, for that he would build a tower too high for the waters to reach, and that he would avenge himself on God for destroying their forefathers. Now the multitude were very ready to follow the determination of Nimrod, and esteem it a piece of cowardice to submit to God, and they built a tower, neither sparing any pains nor being in any degree negligent about their work, and by reason of the multitude of hands employed in it, grew very high, sooner than anyone could expect, but the thickness of it was so great, and it was so strongly built that thereby of its great height seemed upon view to be less than it really was. I was in the pool! So Nimrod is basically the prototypical Tyler Durden who's like, listen to me, you have to consider the possibility that God does not like you. He never wanted you. In all probability, he hates you. This is not the worst thing that can happen.
It isn't?
We don't need him. Fuck damnation, man. We're on God's unwanted children. So be it.
Yeah, straight up Nimrod. Spirit of Nimrod, Tyler Durden.
Now, the Hebrew Bible is not the only holy book to contain a Nimrod-like, Tyler Durden-like hero that teaches a mass of students using violence, and, of course, the use of the koan. This brings us to Linji of Rinzai Buddhism.
So Linji Yixuan was the founder of the Linji school, which is one of the 5 houses of the Hongzhu school of Chan Buddhism. The Linji school became the dominant school within Chan and eventually spread to Japan in the 12th century as the Rinzai school. So in Japanese, Linji is known as Rinzai Gigen. The two are synonymous. The information we have today regarding Linji is based on the Linji Yulu, which is the record of Linji, and this record largely contains stories of his interactions with teachers and with students. He's known for leading students to awakening through hitting and shouting at them, which is intended to remove all of the defects implicit in conceptual understanding. So these shock techniques, such as shouting and beating and using irrational retorts, are used to startle the student into realization. And some of these practices are still common even today. This brings us even further back to the original Fight Club story, which is a story of Linji's awakening. So during Linji's private encounters with his teacher, Huang Po, he was often beaten and then sent away. And eventually, Linji just gave up in despair and sought out Master Taiyu to inform him of the repeated beatings. And upon telling Master Taiyu about how Huang Po beat him, the master congratulated Huang Po's great kindness. It was in this moment that Linji realized that it was Huang Po's way of expressing that his own ordinary mind is the Buddha. So he immediately gained a state of awakening upon reflecting on this, and he exclaimed to the master, "There is nothing special about Huang Po's teachings." So Master Taiyu instantly responded to this by striking Linji. And with his newfound awakening, Linji then hit Master Yu 3 times back, right in the ribs, to affirm his enlightened state. So in this way, it is expressed through the story that Linji's enlightenment was spontaneously expressed through violence, as well as having been triggered by it in the first place. This is like basically the first Fight Club story. This story is told in Rinzai Buddhism to students as a way to explain how the inexpressible can be expressed as a means to spontaneously awaken students, and that the students should consider these actions not acts of violence, but rather acts of compassion meant to shock them out of their dualistic conceptual perspectives and into a state of non-dualistic awareness. And in this sense, the supposed compassionate act of shouting and beating are not outside of Zen concepts of nonviolence, but instead a spiritual transmission of enlightened awareness.
The legend of Fight Club.
The story of Linji was in China, and then it came over to Japan and was established as Rinzai Zen. And a more modern description of the process of being brought into the monastery was described by someone named Morinaga Soko, who was a Rinzai Zen Roshi. And he stated, "The relationship between master and disciple must be so close and so strong that not even a single hair can be inserted between them. In Zen training, the I must at all costs be broken, but this tenacious I cannot be conquered in a timid fashion. Nothing will come of the training unless you dig in your heels and hang on, despite being scolded, struck, or threatened with expulsion."
And if you'd like to hear more about how Fight Club mimics the traditional practices of Japanese Zen Buddhism, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where for $5 you can get all our extended shows, plus access to our Discord server and a 5x5 vinyl sticker of our cover art sent directly to you, which you can use for the purpose of making mischief as you eat carrots and shoot lasers.
Who did this?
I did, actually. Find some gauze.
You shot yourself?
Yes, but it's okay. Marla, look at me. I'm really okay. Trust me. Everything's gonna be fine.